Hello there and welcome to another Hero Arts video. It's Michelle Short here and today I'm going to be doing some tone-on-tone background with the Mandala bold prints. So this is the Mandala bold prints here. It's a really beautiful stamp. It's a nice circular shape, perfect for square cards or the usual A2 sized cards. I placed a piece of white cardstock that's 6 by 6 inches into the stamp platform here. I'm not actually going to need a piece of cardstock that big, but I find that it's easier to stamp onto a larger surface and then cut it down. I'm going to be inking up the stamp with 5 different shades of ink. I'm starting off with the Aegean bold ink and I'm just inking up parts of the image here. I'm then going to take a microfiber cloth and just dab away any excess ink from the side parts. I want the colours to blend together quite nicely. I don't want any harsh lines, and I find that removing some of the ink away from the edges helps with that. It's a little bit difficult to see on camera here, I do apologise, but it is quite a light colour in real life. I do go back and add another layer because I found it to be a little too light. So next I'm using the aquatic colour, really pretty blue colour here. This is quite a bit darker shade, so again I'm going to go in with that microfiber cloth and just soften up the edges. I find that the cube size of ink pads work really well for this because I can just ink up certain areas of the stamp, but it would still work well with the full-sized stamp pads as well, or the ink pads I should say. So I'm going back in with that Aegean ink again, just because I want it to be a bit darker. The camera is actually kind of blurring out some of the colour. It's making it a bit lighter than it actually is in real life, but it is, like I said, it is still quite a fairly light colour. So next I'm going in with an even lighter colour, and this is the Mint Julep ink, a really pretty mint colour. In hindsight, I think I wouldn't have used this colour. I would have stuck with the darker colours, but I do like the colour. You just can't see it that well on the finished card. So next I'm going in with the soft Paul, and this is a really pale colour as well. So I'm going over quite a bit of the stamp area here. Because it's such a light colour, I don't need to blend the edges of that one. I think it's going to blend quite nicely with all of the other colours on its own. And then this colour here is the Paul colour, and this is a fairly dark colour. So again, I'm going to go back in with that microfiber cloth and just soften up those edges a little bit and stamp that down. It's a little bit splotchy here. The inks do sort of fade down and smooth out as it dries, but because some of the colours are a lot lighter than other colours, it does give a bit more of a splotchy look. Personally, I was quite happy with the look of the different colours. Like I said, the camera is bleaching it out a little bit. So next I want to add some colour in the background. I didn't want there to be white, solid white in the background. I wanted it to be tone on tone. So I'm going to blend some colours over the top here. I'm going to use the exact same colours that I did for the stamping. So this is the Mint Julep ink, I believe. And I'm just going to blend that on. I'm using one of the sort of oval makeup brushes here. This is one of the cheap versions, but it blends really quite nicely. I just want a soft colour here in the background, and I want to blend all of the colours together to give a nice look between them. So this here is the Aegean, and I'm just going through and sort of sticking to where the colours were, where I actually stamped, but if some of them overlap, I haven't got a problem with that. But like I say, I think in hindsight I probably wouldn't have used the Mint Julep to actually stamp with, because some of the image is quite light even in real life. I would have just used it maybe to do the ink blending on the background. If I'm using a darker colour and then going to a lighter colour, I'm just wiping off the excess ink of that blending tool onto the microfiber cloth. So I'm quite happy with that as it is at the moment. So I'm going to cut this down using the largest size of the nesting rectangles dies. I am going to further cut this down on the top and the bottom, but I want the actual size of the rectangle for the width of the card. So I'm just making sure that I have it where I want it to be cut, and then I'm just going to run that through my die cutting machine. And now I'm going to cut a little bit off the bottom first of all. I did originally think that I was just going to cut a bit off the bottom and have some of the black card base just peeping out from the bottom, but I quite liked how it was peeping out from the top and the bottom, so I'm just going to cut that down a bit further. So that's going to go onto an A2 sized black card base. So I'm just using some tape runner here just to adhere that onto the card base. Just making sure that that's straight. And then I'm going to work on the sentiment. So I'm going to use the For Everything stamp here. This is from the Thanks Stamp and Cut set. This is one of the older sets, but I absolutely love it for sentiments. So I've got some black cardstock here. I've prepped that with an anti-static powder tool and then stamping the stamp down with Versamark ink. I'm then going to apply some detail white embossing powder. I like to apply a couple of times, tap off the excess, and then I can just funnel the rest back into the jar with the coffee filter. And then I can heat set that until it's completely melted. And then I'm going to cut that down into a strip with a craft knife and a ruler. Next I have cut the Thanks die from the Thanks Stamp and Cut set. I've cut it 3 times from some white cardstock, and I've added some Stick It onto the back of the white cardstock. This is so that I can stick them one on top of the other to create more of a thicker embellishment. I quite like the look with them being a bit more dimensional. I've left them in the paper where I've cut it because I find that with intricate dies like this, I often sort of manipulate them so they don't end up in the shape that they actually meant to be. It doesn't matter too much, but I quite like to keep them how they are, and I find that I at least keep one of them in the surrounding paper, that I can make sure that the other ones are added on straight. And once they're a thicker die cut, it gives it a bit more stability, and then it tends not to move around too much. So just using a craft pick to take out the middles of the letters, and then I'm going to stick that down onto my card. Once that's where I want it, I'm going to use a bone folder just to make sure that I've stuck that down really well. And then I've added some foam tape onto the back of the sentiment strip. I can just remove the backings of that foam tape, and then using a T-square ruler, I'm going to adhere that onto the card as well. And that just finishes up the sentiment. And I think the black works quite nicely with the black card base. And then I'm going to finish off by adding a few sequins from the Frost mix. So I'm using one of the larger white ones and then 2 of the smaller sort of turquoisey teal colours. I think it works really nicely with the colours in the background. So for this sequin here, I'm just going to cut it down a bit so I can pop it behind the sentiment strip. And that's the card finished for today. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Links to the products will be over on the blog, and I will have a link to the blog post in the description bar here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.